There was a time when Earth was filled with life that no human would ever see, a world shaped not by intention, but by the quiet force of evolution unfolding over millions of years. Long before the first tools were crafted, before fire was controlled, before even the earliest ancestors of humanity appeared, the planet carried vast ecosystems of plants that grew, reproduced, and vanished without ever being touched or tasted. These were not crops, not fruits cultivated for sweetness, nor vegetables selected for nourishment. They were wild expressions of survival, plants that evolved in response to ancient climates, shifting continents, and the presence of creatures that no longer exist. Entire landscapes were covered in vegetation that followed evolutionary paths completely separate from the ones that would eventually lead to modern agriculture. To understand this lost world, it is necessary to move far back in time, into the age when flowering plants were beginning to rise. During the Cretaceous period, roughly 140 to 66 million years ago, Earth was warmer than it is today. The continents were arranged differently. Oceans flowed through unfamiliar regions, and the atmosphere itself supported ecosystems unlike anything that exists now. In these environments, plants were not evolving to be useful. There was no pressure to become edible in the way humans define it. Instead, every structure, every tissue, every chemical compound served one purpose: survival and reproduction. Some plants developed protective outer layers around their seeds. Others formed fleshy tissues that could attract specific organisms. These structures may resemble what are now recognized as fruits or vegetables, but they were not designed for general consumption. Scientists believe that many of these early plant forms were highly specialized. A particular plant might depend on a specific insect for pollination, or a narrow group of animals for seed dispersal. These relationships created delicate ecological networks. If one part of the system failed, the entire structure could collapse. This level of specialization made many of these plants incredibly successful in stable conditions, but also extremely vulnerable to change. Fossil evidence provides only fragments of this ancient world, yet even these fragments reveal astonishing diversity. Impressions of leaves show shapes and patterns that do not match any modern species. Fossilized seeds and reproductive structures suggest forms that were neither fully primitive nor fully modern, but something in between, experiments in evolution that did not persist. Some of these plants produce structures that could have been nutrient-rich, possibly even appealing by modern standards, but their chemical composition may have been entirely different. Certain compounds might have made them toxic or unpalatable to most organisms, while others may have restricted their consumption to very specific species. In this way, what might appear edible was often anything but. As forests grew denser, competition intensified. Plants adapted by changing their forms and strategies. Some reached greater heights to capture sunlight, while others spread across the forest floor, taking advantage of shaded environments. Reproductive strategies became more varied. Some plants produced large numbers of seeds, increasing the chances of survival through quantity. Others invested in protective structures, ensuring that fewer seeds had a higher chance of reaching maturity. Among these strategies were the early forms of fruit-like structures. Unlike modern fruits, which are often soft, sweet, and brightly colored, these ancient forms may have been tougher, less appealing, and more chemically complex. Their purpose was not to attract a wide range of animals, but to interact with very specific ones. In some cases, they may have relied on insects, in others on small vertebrates that no longer exist. Over time, the balance of these ecosystems began to shift. Climate changes altered temperature and humidity patterns. Geological processes reshaped the land, creating mountains, opening oceans, and isolating populations. Plants that once thrived found themselves in conditions they could not tolerate. Some adapted, but many did not. One of the most dramatic turning points came at the end of the Cretaceous period. Around 66 million years ago, a massive environmental disruption changed the course of life on Earth. While it is often associated with the extinction of large animals, the impact on plant life was equally profound. Sunlight was reduced, temperatures fluctuated, and entire forests were destroyed. Plants that depended on stable conditions were among the first to disappear. Highly specialized species, which relied on specific ecological relationships, were particularly vulnerable. As their partners vanished, they could no longer reproduce effectively. Slowly, and then rapidly, entire lineages were lost. In the aftermath, the earth began to recover. Surviving plants expanded into the newly available spaces. Among them, flowering plants proved especially adaptable. They diversified, forming new relationships with emerging animal species. Over time, these plants gave rise to the structures that would eventually become the fruits and vegetables known today. But the plants that existed before this transformation, the ones that had evolved along different paths, were gone. Their forms, their flavors, their ecological roles disappeared with them. What remains are only traces, preserved in stone, waiting to be interpreted. The idea of a world filled with plants that humans never reached raises deeper questions about evolution. evolution itself. It suggests that the path leading to modern ecosystems was not inevitable. It was one of many possible outcomes, shaped by chance events and shifting conditions. The plants that survive today are not necessarily the most complex or the most capable in every sense. They are simply the ones that endured. Modern agriculture depends on a surprisingly small number of plant species. Despite the vast diversity of plant life on Earth, only a limited group has been cultivated and refined over thousands of years. This makes the existence of those lost plants even more intriguing. It implies that the range of possible food sources was once far greater than what is known today. There may have been plants with flavors never experienced, textures that do not exist in modern produce, or nutritional properties unlike anything currently available. But because these plants disappeared long before humans began to cultivate the land, their potential was never realized. Scientists continue to study fossil records, searching for clues about these ancient species. By examining the structure of preserved seeds, the patterns of leaf impressions, and the composition of fossilized tissues, researchers attempt to reconstruct a picture of what these plants might have been like. Comparisons with modern species provide hints, but they cannot fully capture the uniqueness of extinct forms. There are limits to what can be known. Without living examples, many aspects of these plants remain uncertain. Their exact appearance, their growth cycles, and their interactions with other organisms are often inferred rather than directly observed. Even so, the evidence points to a world of extraordinary diversity. The lost plants were not failures in the traditional sense. Many of them existed for millions of years, adapting successfully to their environments. Their extinction was not a result of weakness, but of changes that no species could fully control. In reflecting on this ancient world, it becomes clear that the history of plant life is far more complex than the familiar landscapes of farms and orchards. The vegetation that surrounds humanity today represents only a small fraction of what has existed. Behind every modern plant lies a long history of adaptation, competition, and survival, shaped by countless forms that have since disappeared. The world of plants that humans never reached is not just a curiosity. It is a reminder of the vastness of Earth's history and the countless possibilities that have come and gone. It shows that the present is only one moment in an ongoing process, a snapshot of life that continues to evolve. Somewhere in that distant past, there were forests filled with structures that resembled food, yet were never eaten by humans. There were plants that might have sustained life in entirely different ways, had they survived long enough to be discovered. But they did not. Instead, they remain part of a hidden chapter of Earth's story, one that can only be glimpsed through fragments and imagination. A world of plants that existed, thrived, and vanished, leaving behind no direct trace in the fields and gardens of today, but shaping them in ways that are only beginning to be understood.